Welcome to the next BYTE podcast. Hello, Dr. Soman. It's great to have you on this podcast.
Wonderful to be here.
Yeah, thank you. On this episode, we are going to deep dive into the world of AI and business transformation. But before that, let us have a small introduction of our guest today. So, Dr. Soman, I would request you to give a small introduction of your journey.
Okay. Well, my journey for the last several decades now has primarily been working for startups.
Okay.
Startups in various areas. And that has given me an opportunity to observe Indian industry in particular from a fairly close range.
Right.
From an educational perspective, I am a engineer. I did my undergraduation at IIT Bombay in elect engineering, and I also have a PhD in signal processing from Caltech.
Okay.
So that's my introduction. And like I said, I mean, I've been observing things happening around me, and anything that I share with you is purely those observations.
Sure. That's great. That's sure. So let's start with our questions today. So, as we all know, right, the world is experiencing an AI boom right now.
Mhm.
But with that boom, there is a lot of ambiguity about how do you implement these AI strategies, right? So, my first question to you is, why is it so important to analyze AI solution in implementation strategies?
So, yes, I mean, you're right. These days, all talk is around AI.
Correct.
And actually, CIOs and IT managers are under tremendous pressure to, adopt or implement AI-enabled solutions. And there is what's called FOMO, right? Fear
Correct.
of missing out.
Yeah.
So there is pressure from the management in various companies because chairmen, CEOs, etc. see all the wonderful things that are happening around them,
Correct.
and they naturally indirectly pressurize the IT teams or the information technology teams to leverage some of these new technologies in their own businesses.
Right.
So a big part of it is FOMO, but there is a certain element of hype as well.
Mhm.
And that is really the driver right now. In fact, in most cases, you also see budgets being allocated for AI initiatives. And one of the big sins that a IT manager or a CIO can commit is not utilize a budget that has been allocated.
Correct.
So, I mean, those are the pressures that CIOs face these days in terms of adopting these new emerging technologies. Having said that, the flip side is that there is also a little bit of struggle in terms of trying to identify initiatives that will deliver returns. Okay, so that is the situation that is confronting IT managers today. What are those? On one hand, there is pressure to sort of do something, and on the other, there is there is a little bit of a question mark around what is it that can deliver measurable returns.
Correct.
So that's the essentially the dichotomy that's being faced today.
Right. Yeah.
So there is also a recently there was a study that came out. It was published by MIT's NANDA institution, and the title of that study was the Gen AI Divide: State of AI in Business. And basically, what that report said, I mean, the executive summary I would have quoted, but just from memory, what that report said was that in spite of tremendous amount of investment in Gen AI, only 5% of the companies were seeing measurable ROI on those investments. So 95% of the people are not getting the returns that they were expecting. Now, this report, of course, had to do with Gen AI,
Right.
and as you know, there are various different types of AI algorithms, but this also extends to other AI initiatives. So, to take this as one sample study, it looks like at least some people are not seeing the kind of returns on their AI investments. So that's what makes this topic important. That's what makes it important for CIOs and IT managers to understand how best to channelize their investments such that they give them some returns.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. This insight I heard for the first time. Yeah. So to follow up with that question, my second question would be, when a company basically decides to deploy an AI solution, right? What are the paths that the company has in front of them? So by that, what I mean is, do they build their own model? Do they?
Okay.
Yeah.
So, first of all, I want to preface this discussion with a context. Okay.
Sure.
Like I said in my introduction, my exposure has been to Indian companies, uh, typically traditional enterprises. So, mature industries, manufacturing, FMCG, construction, textiles, chemicals, etc. I mean, those are the industries that I have had a chance to interact with.
Right.
And all of these discussions are highly industry specific.
Correct.
So what we speak about in today's discussion may not hold for creative industries like content creation, writing, etc., etc. So marketing industry, etc. What we say right now may not apply to those, where the returns on some of the Gen AI investments may be more immediate. So I want to make that clear. I want to place this in context, Indian context, and more mature traditional industries.
Okay.
And finally, I mean, this disclaimer always should be out there. We are talking about current state of art.
Absolutely.
So this is a rapidly evolving field, and what happens tomorrow, we don't know.
Yeah.
So those are the things that you need to keep in mind while we discuss this thing today.
Sure.
So as you were indicating, there are two approaches that a company can typically take. I mean, one is of course building and training AI models themselves.
Right.
So companies can invest in people, in the technology, build technology in house to implement those AI models, train them, and see what comes out of it. That is approach number one.
Correct.
Approach number two would be to use AI solutions that are developed by third parties and are available off the shelf. It is observed that the approach of using solutions developed by third parties available off the shelf normally has a better chance of delivering returns.
Right.
Okay, as opposed to investing in building and training models in house. Actually, if you look at the entire exercise of building AI models in house, training them and trying to see what comes out of it, this is a fairly tricky path.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Now, what happens in these situations is, of course, you have to invest in the right sort of people. They have to sort of have the right background, not just in terms of AI, but also in terms of understanding your industry.
Correct.
And that's typically not easy. It takes time. And what happens is that there are as you start implementing these models and training them, etc., etc., the early returns always seem very encouraging.
Correct.
Okay. Correct. So this is a little bit like those online gambling platforms where you gamble 10 rupees and you get 20 rupees back. You gambled 100 rupees, you get 200 rupees back.
Right.
But when you gamble 1 lakh rupees, you will not get 2 lakh rupees back. You will typically lose that money.
Yeah. Correct.
So it's a little bit like that. And let me explain this analogy because some people may be offended by it. What happens is that hitting, let's just use vaguely the term efficiency, right? Model efficiency, or efficiency in terms of how correct your model predicts a certain behavior. Hitting efficiencies of 60-70% happens very quickly, maybe even within a week or two.
Right.
And that makes you think that, okay, if I'm here in a week, maybe I can get to, what I need, 195 plus, 99 plus type efficiencies in, a couple of months or so. But that curve is always logarithmic. In fact, you could say it's log of log because the early returns come very quickly.
Correct.
And then you will struggle for months, years to make progress subsequently. Right? So like a logarithmic curve. So you should not be overly carried away by early successes if you're building things in-house. On the other hand, your entire objective may be to build capabilities in-house. And then in that case, you're not really worried about an ROI. You're only thinking in terms of, I've hired a bunch of people, let them learn, let them experiment, and eventually their expertise will come in handy.
Correct.
So if that is your objective, then you're not worried about ROIs in the first place. But if you're worried about ROI, this can be a tricky slope, doing things in-house. So your better course of action would be to use solutions developed by third parties.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So what we basically covered in this question is that there are two approaches. One is building models in house, and one is using models already built by third parties. Right. So now, if I'm a decision maker, how should I frame the landscape or the options that I have in front of me? Right. So how should I visualize the landscape if I want to sign up for a new solution, which may be developed by a third party?
Okay. So as with everything else, understanding the players involved in this ecosystem
Sure.
goes a long way.
Mhm.
Okay. So let me explain what I mean by that. Now, in the AI technology landscape as well, there is sort of a supply chain. Okay,
Right.
let me call it that.
Right.
So there are those who create fundamental AI models. You could say AI model creators. There are sources of data, right? So AI is all about having a model and training it with data.
Correct.
So both things are important. So there are data sources that are either you could mine them from you could mine data from certain places, or they may be available. You may buy the data, etc., etc. But you have AI model creators, you have data sources.
Mhm.
Then you have the solution provider, right? So the
Correct.
solution provider is the guy who will probably build on top of the core model,
Right.
maybe even bring in his own data sources and then create a solution. So that's the reason I call him the solution provider. The solution provider always needs an infra or a hardware vendor. I mean, where the hosting vendor, let's call him that. So he needs a data center,
Right.
where his GPUs are going to sit.
Hmm.
So that's the fourth player in the ecosystem. Now you are the buyer typically of a third party solution, and in order to implement a solution, you may actually even hook up with a consultant or a implementer who sort of does things that you are not able to do.
Correct.
So these are the different people in the ecosystem, and you are the buyer. I mean, you are
Right.
the buyer who
Right.
buys the solution or licenses the solution or subscribes to the solution from the solution provider.
Correct.
But it's important to understand that behind the solution provider are these various entities.
Mhm.
The hosting company, the agency that created the AI model in the first place. Now, that could even be an open source
Correct.
model, but it's important to know where the core model is coming from. Where is the training data coming from? So on and so forth. Now, as a buyer, you could also end up being one of the data sources
Mhm.
for the solution.
Correct.
So the solution provider, what he's going to do is he's going to actually take your data,
Right.
use it to train the model, and then deliver the results, right? So you have to be very cognizant of whether you are one of the data sources
Mhm.
for the solution provider.
Correct.
Okay, so this you have to figure out whether that is the case. Data is precious, as you know. I mean, your data is your data.
Yeah.
It has immense value, more value than you can imagine, and therefore, this aspect is important. And as far as roles in the ecosystem are concerned, I would like to define one more role. I mean, there is a role of a victim.
Right.
Victim means a buyer who gets no ROI,
Right.
does not get a return on his investment, and ends up giving all his data to the solution provider. That, let's call that entity a victim.
Yeah.
So it's a slippery slope from being a buyer to becoming a victim.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
And therefore you have to be extremely cautious that you tread this path carefully. Right. So that is the overall landscape. Those are the different players involved in this game.
Sure. Yeah. That answers my question pretty much. So my next question would come from the last point that you made. So as you said, there is a thin line between being a buyer and becoming a victim, right? So for someone to avoid being a victim, what is the first step that he should do while finalizing a solution or finalizing a model?
Right. So the first step is the most important step, right? So as with anything else,
Right.
and in this case, identifying the problem is the most fundamental aspect that can define or govern or dictate the success of your initiative.
Correct.
Right. So if you want to be successful in implementing an AI solution, you have to first of all you have to identify the problem
Right.
suitably,
Right.
right? And that's the key step that defines the chances of success. Now, how do you identify the problem, the first problem that you take up, right? So some people have a view that you should go after the hardest problem that gives the most results first,
Right.
right?
Right.
My observation is that you need to go after the low hanging fruit first. So low hanging fruit meaning the problem that has the maximum chances of being successfully
Correct.
solved.
Correct. Yeah.
Right? So because my observation is that success becomes a habit. So if you, just as failure can also become a habit.
Correct.
So if you fail in the beginning once, twice, 2, 3 times, then your chances of
Yeah.
eventually succeeding, I feel are diminished. Whereas if you succeed in your first few initiatives, it creates a momentum of its own, and your likelihood of solving bigger problems increases.
Right.
So
Right.
I think from the perspective of identifying the problem, that is absolutely the key. Identifying the correct problem first as your first problem to solve. Try to go after something that is simple, where the likelihood of success is high. It need not be a problem in your core area of business. It could be an associated problem. The returns may be less,
Right.
but where the chances of success are high. So that is the first. That I think should be your first effort.
Okay.
Also, identifying the problem means identifying what are you going to eventually get in return, right? So when you say identify a problem, what does that mean? It means after having implemented the solution, what are you going to get in return?
Right.
So it may end up saving time of people in your organization, or improving their efficiency, improving the quality of their output, or
Correct.
increasing revenues, reducing expenses in certain ways, and doing things that are not possible earlier, right? So out of all of these, I think the easiest problems, again, this is a rule. I'm not saying this is always the case. It's not a rule. It's just an observation.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Initiatives that tend to reduce expenses are are in many ways often the low hanging fruit.
Correct.
Okay. Or increasing work efficiency, because there is like an analog scale there. So even if you increase the efficiency by a little bit, you get something in return.
Right.
So those are typically the easiest problems to solve. Trying to do things that were not possible earlier is probably the hardest thing to do.
Correct.
Right? So that is what I mean by identifying the problem. Choose something where it's easy to solve, and where your chances of success are high.
Okay.
I'm repeating myself, but that's how it is.
So that's an interesting take that we got from you. Basically, is that it's for the viewers to decide, but not going for the harder problem and going for the problem which has an easy solution, or where there is a higher chance of success. That's a very interesting take. But when a company allocates a budget for, say, an AI implementation, it looks for ROI, right? So basically, can you tell us more about the ROI computation, or let's dig into how organizations compute ROI when they basically implement some AI strategies, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So again, I think that the computation of ROI, or the projected ROI,
Right.
is probably the most difficult aspect of this whole thing. And I think our discussion, I think it's going in the right direction, because what exactly is ROI, how do we compute it, is something that every company needs to spend time on. So ROI is what? Return on investment, right? So there is a numerator, which is the return, and the denominator, which is the investment that we make, and you have to increase the value of that fraction. So if you have to increase the value of that fraction, you have to increase the numerator, which is the return.
Right.
Now, what can the return possibly be, right? So you have to think about what can the return possibly be. Number one, it can be increased revenues, right? It might be a reduction in expenses, right? And reduction in expenses itself may come from various different angles: time saved, enhanced efficiency, lesser resources used,
Correct.
so on and so forth. So reduced expenses, that's the other way of measuring returns. And the third thing, like we said, is being able to do things that were not possible earlier. So
Right.
you could come up, you could undertake an initiative that allows you to design or build some completely different products that have completely different characteristics, and that will sell really well in the market. So
Correct.
doing things not possible earlier. So these are the different examples of returns that you can imagine from your initiative, right?
Okay.
And you need to essentially quantify or measure these or project what these are likely to be. I think it is important to define the metric upfront. Metric in the sense, which of these are you going to get? Are you going to be able to increase your revenues or reduce expenses, etc., as the case may be, and kind of put in place a metric that means a measure of how you will compute this increased revenue or reduced expenses and so on. It may, if it is directly translating into rupees, that's a different story. That makes your computation easy. But many times that may not be possible, right? Because that increased revenue may happen in the future. So you may have to do some guesswork or some computation or projection in terms of what that increased revenue is going to be. So, but that metric needs to be defined upfront. So that's the numerator. And the denominator is, of course, the investment that you make, right? And the investment is essentially the cost. Now, it could be the cost of the solution that you procure from the third party. It could be the cost of implementation. So if you hire another consultant to do this implementation for you, that's going to cost you money. There is a cost of gathering data also. Okay. So many times somebody will come up to you with a solution and tell you that, look, for this solution to work, you need to have this data, and it turns out that you don't have that data, or you are not capturing that data in the first place. And in industries, that may even involve installing some new sensors or measuring devices. So there is a cost associated with gathering useful data, right? And then there is the cost of sharing that data. Now, this is the big question mark. So cost of sharing that data means, let us say if you end up in a scenario where your solution vendor requires you to provide that data to him, it could be a cloud-based solution, and effectively you are uploading your entire data to the cloud. You have to place place a price on the cost of sharing that data. How valuable is that data? How valuable can it be to somebody else if they lay their hands on that data? What if this guy goes out of business tomorrow and is not able to protect that data? So cost of sharing that data, and this is a fuzzy sort of a quantity, but you need to put a price on it. It's more in terms of evaluating that risk. Okay, the cost is going to be the risk. I mean, what happens if you lose this data? Because it's at the end of the day, it's leaving your organization. So that is also a cost. And then if there is a custom development or integration, that cost you have to compute, and then your hosting cost, because somewhere this will run. But some of this may be folded into the cost of the solution. So broadly speaking, cost of the solution, cost of gathering the data, the risk of losing that data, and if you have some implementers or consultants doing their work, you may want to put a figure on that as well. Of course. So that is the denominator. And what always happens is you end up underestimating the cost and overestimating your returns. Right? So anytime you're undertaking a new initiative, you feel gung-ho about it, you are naturally optimistic about it, you want it to succeed, and all that is good. But in that entire mind frame that you are in, you end up underestimating the cost. Your computation of costs end up being on the lower side, and you end up overestimating the returns. That means you think you're going to get far more returns than you do. So you have to be very practical, you have to be cautious, and you have to do a sensible job in terms of estimating the costs and the returns. Now, again, this is not about any specific vendor, but in general, any ROI figures provided by any vendor need to be taken with a pinch of salt. Okay, not because vendors are necessarily looking to mislead you, but all of these ROI figures that are published, they are highly dependent on the circumstances in which these measurements were made.
Correct.
So if somebody got an ROI, I mean, he may be exactly in the same business as you, but the circumstance in which somebody else got a certain ROI, those circumstances may be completely different from your own, or they may even be slightly different from your own.
Right.
And even that slight difference will cause a dramatic change into the ROI that you get and somebody else gets.
Correct.
So any figures that are published on websites of any AI vendor saying that this is the efficiency observed, these are the returns observed, etc., you have to treat it with a good deal of skepticism. Not because the vendor wants to lie to you,
Correct.
but because there is a very, very large footnote accompanying that figure, and that footnote is not published on the website.
Absolutely.
So that's a caution that you need to bear in mind. Just because somebody advertises a 74% reduction in expenses,
does not mean
it doesn't mean anything.
Correct.
It doesn't just mean not 74. I would say it means nothing.
Right.
So
Okay.
yeah.
So basically, what I understand is every company needs to define their own metrics.
Correct.
It may be the reduction in expenses, maybe increase in efficiency. It depends on company to company.
Correct.
Right. So there's one more thing that I wanted to ask is that how common is it that a lot of companies are adopting AI because they can and not because they need it in their organization, right? So it is commonly said that AI solutions resemble a hammer in search of a nail, right? What would be like? Do you agree on that comment, or what would be your comments on that?
Okay. Well, I mean, in certain situations that is true. I will give examples of that. But before we go there, I just want to sort of, draw your attention to how hard it is to estimate the ROI.
Correct.
And I want to go over some of the aspects that you need to keep in mind while calculating the ROI. So broadly, there are two types of solutions. Okay, for various problems. I mean, I would define these two categories: exact solutions and inexact solutions. Okay, so there are problems for which inexact solutions are okay.
Okay.
And there are some problems for which you absolutely need exact solutions.
Sure.
Okay, so let me give you examples.
Yeah.
So suppose you are trying to build an AI system for medical diagnosis, right? So the expectation from the solution is, the expected efficiency of that solution, you need it to be very high, right? Because it is absolutely unacceptable that you come up with a wrong medical diagnosis.
Correct.
Right? So that is a situation where the bar is extremely high. So when I say exact and inexact, you could also say bar is extremely high versus bar is not that high.
Sure.
So for example, that's an example where you need a solution that works 100%.
Correct.
Or for example, contract management, contract analysis, right? Would you won't, I mean, there are systems that say that we'll get the summary of the contract and we'll do this and that, etc. You wouldn't want such a system to miss out on any aspect of that contract.
Absolutely.
So again, the bar is extremely high.
Correct.
As opposed to that, there are some solutions or some problems where an inexact solution or a solution that does not give the best possible answer is also okay. For example, if you're using an AI solution for identifying candidates for interviews, HR, let's say 5,000 candidates applied, right? And assume that in some ways there was the best candidate, and then there was a second best candidate, third best, etc. And instead of zooming in on the very best candidate, your AI solution identified the third or fourth best resumes for you out of 5,000. Right? Now that's okay.
Yeah.
right? That's
Yeah.
okay. You are not, the heavens are not going to collapse just because
Right.
you got a guy who was slightly, below the best possible resume hidden in that heap, right? So that is one type of problem.
Sure.
That's the other type of problem. Or for example, an investment advisor, right? Let us say you took an investment advice from an AI tool, and the advice that it gave you ended up giving you a monthly return of whatever, 18%. Whereas, some other calculation would have yielded 19%.
Right.
Now, 18% is not a bad return, and you're not lost money, you made a decent return.
Correct.
And again, it's not the end of the world.
Right.
So, those are problems where, you're okay even if you do not hit the absolute best answer. Whereas in the other case that I mentioned, the room for errors is zero.
Correct.
So exact solutions have a higher bar for success, and you have to choose wisely. Again, my observation is that if you're just starting off, it is better to start off with problems where an inexact solution is acceptable. So problems where you need to do better than what you're doing right now, and even if you don't hit the best possible answer, you would still be okay. So if those are the kind of problems, that should be your first uh, set of problems that you tackle.
Sure.
Right. Then there is this whole question of individual use versus personal productivity versus enterprise applications. Now, what is observed typically, and this is not just traditional industries, but even in IT companies, when people use something like a chat GPT for quickly drafting emails or proposals, that helps them save time, just compose better mails, draft better proposals, and so on. So the idea of using some of these tools for personal productivity or for individual use is a no-brainer.
Right.
You should absolutely start doing that. I think what we are talking about more is an enterprise-wide deployment of a solution.
Correct.
And that is where that's a lot harder case to get an ROI. So if you are looking at tools for individual use or personal productivity, those you should absolutely do. That's a low-hanging fruit.
Okay.
So you should absolutely go after that.
Right.
Okay. So now let me come to the hammer in search of a nail.
Correct.
Scenario.
Yeah.
So you see that happening sometimes. Okay, I'll give you an example. So language model solutions are proposed for extracting data from, let's say, invoices and POs. Right. So an invoice or a PO would be a PDF file, and you train a model that is able to extract the quantity, the price per quantity, the total invoice value, or the GSTN number, this, that, etc. Now, you should always explore alternative approaches to solving any problem. Okay, and if you think about it, all of this data in the invoice is available in the discrete form with the person who issued the invoice, right? So converting discrete data into a PDF and then extracting the discrete data from that PDF is like a roundabout way of doing things. Whereas you could, ask the invoice creator to give you the discrete data to begin with, right? Accompanying the PDF.
Right.
So that's what I view as a hammer in search of a nail. Just because you have a language model, just because you have an AI model that is able to extract data from a PDF, this is not a use case to go after. When
Correct.
you have the discrete data to begin with.
Absolutely.
And which vendor is going to decline giving you discrete data if you tell him that giving you discrete data is going to speed up his payment? Right? That's what it's going to do. If you have access to the discrete data, you can pay him quickly. Absolutely. And if you tell him that, every single vendor on the planet will give you discrete data immediately.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
So this is an example of hammer in search of a nail. Right? Or for example, I'll give you another example. Text or speech interpretation. Right? So people build complex language models for interpreting what somebody is saying. In India, there are multiple languages, so you want to do this in 25 different languages.
Correct.
Enormous amount of money is spent. So, for example, if somebody calls you and says कि मेरा credit card का कुछ हो गया है, etc., you want to interpret what that guy is saying and you want to help him. But the AVR systems that are in use, automatic voice recognition, they do an even better job than that. Because what is easier for this guy who's frantically calling you up? I mean, he blurts out something, he makes a mistake in saying what he wants to say, and then you try to interpret it, or you just tell him कि for credit card के लिए एक दबाइए, debit card के लिए दो दबाइए, lost card के लिए ये करो वो करो. So that works better. I mean, so some of these, when you're trying to, I guess the point I'm making is that when you are looking at coming up with an AI model for solving a particular problem, an important component of estimating the ROI is to find out if there is an alternative solution to that problem that can give you equally good or even better answers.
Correct.
Okay?
Yeah.
Because what is ROI? I mean, when you compute the ROI, you have to compare what your AI solution is giving you in comparison with the alternative.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
And that doesn't mean that you completely ignore the alternative.
Correct.
You have to find the best alternative out there and then sort of measure what is that AI model giving you above this alternative.
Right.
That is the return that you have to consider.
Correct.
Right.
Absolutely.
So therefore, investigating alternative approaches, when you say that you want to solve this, you want to implement an AI solution for this, what is an alternative solution to that problem should be an important part of your overall discussion and computation of ROI. That's what I mean.
Right. Sure. Yeah.
So if you move away from the language models a little bit, a lot of some of these areas are overlapping. So some of what people think is AI is also traditional data analytics.
Correct.
And there are business intelligence tools, data analytics tools that have been in the market for decades, right? So you have to, when I say investigate alternative approaches, look at what was there in the market 5 years ago, 10 years ago as well.
Correct.
And then compute your returns as to what more AI can do for you as compared to what was already available in the market.
Right.
Traditionally. So I guess those are important factors to keep in mind for your ROI computation.
Absolutely. So, Dr. Soman, considering all these points, what would be your advice when it comes to how does one basically maximize the ROI, right? Because when companies are trying to implement these strategies, they're also looking at maximizing the ROI. So how do they successfully do that?
Okay. So I think, like I said, identifying the problem, getting accurate metrics of what you're looking for is important. And also it is important to keep in mind that maximizing ROI may not be the same thing as maximizing the return.
Right.
So maximizing the value of a fraction is not the same thing as maximizing its numerator, right?
Correct.
So because this effectiveness versus resources curve is logarithmic, your early returns may come at by investing not too much of resources.
Right.
So you have to understand that this could be a journey. So it's not like you're going to implement a solution and that's the end of it.
Right.
Look at it as a journey. Okay. If you undertake an initiative, you should accept the fact that there's not going to be a solution. This is not going to be like you do something and that's the end of the story. You are going to go through a long journey of implementation, refinement, etc. And at any point in time, you have to be cognizant of this fact and put in as much resources as required to ensure that you are getting more than commensurate returns. Okay. And that may involve not maximizing the returns upfront, because trying to absolutely maximizing the returns will require enormous number of resources.
Correct.
Amount of resources.
Correct.
So where on that logarithmic curve you want to be at any specific point in time, I think that is really important to understand. And the people who I have seen being successful, they understand that this is a long journey,
Right.
and they say that on this graph I want to be at this point right now, and then over the next 1 year I'll go to this point, and so on and so forth. So
Okay.
that is how I've seen them operate.
Sure.
And like I said, I mean, since these are early days, there is also a case to be made for capacity building.
Mm-hmm.
So ROI is of course one thing,
Right.
but you have resources. There are people working for you in your tech teams, and your investment may actually be going towards educating them, training them,
Correct. Correct.
for them to be able to do better things in the future.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I mean, that's also that's in a way a return as well.
Correct.
So I think that is how you should look at it. You should look at it as a journey.
Absolutely.
That's pretty much it. I mean,
Okay.
the other aspect of it could be the vendor selection, and since I said that things work, your probability of success is going to be higher when you sort of work with a third party who has experience and
Absolutely.
expertise.
Yeah.
So vendor selection becomes an important criteria. There, of course, you have to look at cost, you have to look at the reliability of the vendor. One very important thing to evaluate a vendor solution, a solution given by a vendor, is to actually see if the system can learn from whatever feedback you give and retain context.
Right.
Okay, so what I mean by that is that the way things operate in any organization is different.
Mhm.
Okay, and if the best system is the one that can understand your way of operation and adapt to it, which can sort of capture the context of what's happening and learn from any inputs that you give the system.
Correct.
So when you evaluate a system from a third party, always see what is its ability to take feedback from you and retain context.
Okay.
Right. So learning how well the system learns, even about your workflows, because those are the systems that will give you maximum returns eventually.
Right. Right.
You have to be careful about how your data is handled. I mean, I spoke at length about this.
Yeah.
Your data is valuable, and you should make sure that you end up compromising as little of your data as possible. You have to ask your vendor if your data is going to be used for training their engines.
Correct.
So it's okay to have those discussions.
Sure.
And then you do what you are comfortable with.
Correct. Yeah.
Normally, your data is a lot more valuable than you think it is.
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So keep that in mind. And the other aspect that often helps you evaluate a system is asking which solution is this product primarily developed for.
Mhm.
Okay, so if it is a company based in some other country, and that's normally defined by where the head office is.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So where is the head office of the company? In which country does the CEO of the company live?
Right.
Okay. So the product is usually developed for that market and works best in that market.
Right.
Now they may want to expand into other countries, other territories. That's natural, but the way things happen in every country is slightly different. And like I said, if the problem statement changes slightly, the ROI that results is going to vary drastically.
Correct.
So that's important to keep in mind. And if the vendor is okay doing pilots for you, go for that.
Okay.
Right. So vendor selection is important in terms of getting the ROI.
Yeah. So what we have covered till now basically is that implementing AI strategies is not is basically a ongoing process. It's on a lighter note. It's not a T20 match, but a test match where you have to keep on basically grinding it out and keep implementing it and keep working on it, right? But for example, if I'm an IT manager or a CTO who has to implement an AI tool in the organization, what problems will I have to deal with, or what would be your advice? What steps should I be following to implement it successfully?
So pretty much the summary of what we discussed. I mean, first of all,
Correct.
identify the problem correctly.
Right.
Okay, and keep the things that we spoke about, how to identify the problem. Right,
Mhm.
Go after the low-hanging fruit first, followed by harder problems.
Absolutely.
Determine the ROI equation. That means correctly define the metrics on how you're going to compute the returns and get a good handle on the investment, right? So estimate them as well as you can. Have a clear implementation strategy in place.
Right.
And by implementation strategy, it may be as something as simple as choosing the right vendor.
Correct.
Right. So vendor selection, I mean, everything is being done by the vendor solution.
Right.
In that case, vendor selection is probably the only thing.
One of the most important.
Yeah, probably the only thing, right?
Yeah.
So go over, like we said, I mean, there are several things to be kept in mind when you select a vendor. And we began by saying that your management may be pressurizing you to do something.
Correct.
And you may have budgets.
Yeah.
So I mean, things that are done under pressure typically never are successful.
Yeah.
So if your boss is asking you, why isn't it that you're moving faster, or why are you going in this very deliberate manner, you can tell your boss to listen to this podcast.
Yeah. Thank you for watching our podcast. We'll keep you updated for further videos.